Right, what about this then? So I'll actually ask a very specific question now, not abstract like the concept we were talking about there, but it's tied into it, which is, you alluded to it earlier. If people did have that angle, I mean, actually, you could even use the SK Gaming example, because they went over and eventually they did start winning tournaments and winning SWC. People would have used that actually as the example that we're talking about to be like, oh, see, they would win with anyone card. It wasn't about you. But already that year, you'd had, like, I think the ultimate sort of rebuttal, which was the IEM European Championship that you won, that you alluded to, where you brought in Peter and Exist and Delpan, and you remade the squad after GeT RiGhT and f0rest had gone. Right, this particular tournament, I wanted to know, do you see it the same way as outsiders? Like, outsiders, the storyline, if people don't know, was like this. At the end of 2010, when they had this amazing Fnatic lineup that just wasn't, it wasn't even that it wasn't good, it just wasn't as good as it wanted to be. So it broke up, and these star players left, and when they left, you had to basically recruit whoever was left over in the scene. Like, there wasn't actually that many top players available. You know, you had to sort of pick people and gamble on some people and take this guy and that guy and see, you know. Meanwhile, because the star players, as you say, went to SK Gaming, which on paper had an insane, it was like an all-star team, basically, like skilled players, every fan thought, what I was alluding to, it was like, right, well, they're going to win everything, and this Fnatic team's going to win nothing. Now, the first big event of this next year was this IEM European Championship. And if people don't know, the SK Gaming team didn't even make it out the groups. They actually just bombed completely and literally just left Ukraine and went home. Meanwhile, this Fnatic team incredibly actually won the whole tournament. And in fact, at a time when the pairs were considered very competitive, actually, if you go look at the top four of that tournament, all the other three are like the biggest teams in the world. It's like Na'Vi, MTW, the Pauls. Like, these are all teams that everyone expected to win. So I have to say, cArn, when you won this tournament in kind of like shocking fashion, like I say in the context there, most people do actually agree that, like, it shows that you must have had like some special skill as a leader, or people undervalued you. I'll even tell you a little funny detail. I won't say who it was, but within SK Gaming, where I was working at the time, one of the guys who was a manager at SK, this is how people just go so radically when something happens that they'll just overreact. He was just typing in this group chat like, how the fuck does he do it? It's just cArn. You can put anyone with him and he'll just win. And I was like, well, calm down. Like, look, it's only one tournament. But dude, people really bought into this storyline. Like, what do you think on this topic? Because, like I say, if it was a movie, that would be a fucking brilliant scene. Like, you know, like, you'd what do you think? Because there's some truth to it, right?
Well, speaking about the movie opportunity there, with all respect to Ukraine, but Cyber Arena, quite smoky, dark, dull. Well, it was the best in class at that point, I guess. But
true.
I can think about, a similar story at a IEM Katowice right now would probably be quite baller Netflix material.
Yes.
But, you know, that was a tough time. So how long time do we have, Duncan? No, but let's just zoom in on the important part and connecting that with the question that you raised. So, I mean, pre-f0rest, pre-GeT RiGhT, and that kind of group. Gux was the third player, by the way, but he didn't join SK because they had a fallout as well because he didn't want to go to SK. That's also a separate topic. It kind of branches out quite quickly when we're speaking on old stuff. But anyway, so even before I played with f0rest, right, I managed to win international tournament, and I did it more than a few times. Well, I did a few times, let's call it that. But obviously, he definitely accelerated that, or he was a catalyst. It enabled us to get a prime position from where we can recruit the next star in Sweden, because we kind of won the battle against the local NIPs or the SKs in terms of like who's going to get the next GeT RiGhT.
Yes.
A bit like G2 to some degree in League of Legends the last few years. Like, that's the team most players, not all, wants to go to.
Yes.
Anyhow, I mean, that was a amazing live event for me. So, I mean, a few weeks prior to that, you know, obviously there was some dark moments, not just because it was December. I was back in Sweden. My grandma had just passed away. I was generally quite lost in life. Yet I was like, what was I, 24, 25? So I'm still a man to some regard, but very confused. Like, can I actually come back now? I'd spent years before, like, is now I should retire, whatever. So to some degree, this earned me a bit of a reignite, channeled through, you know, the long-term partnership and being a teammate with DSN, who I started to play with probably back in 2003. We kind of like just went on the market, and exclusively so in Sweden, and we tried to get someone called Nico, I believe. He was really good with the Deagle and some of the other weapons. Op, that's not to be confused with today's Nico or the Nikos, but a Swedish Nico. But we landed on Pita, Delpan, and Exist. And Exist, I do think, had the chance to actually go to SK, and I think that would have settled their year to be the team of the year, because I think he could brought in some in-game leadership, or at least helped Robban on that part. But anyway, so that was really monumental in terms of like confidence boost. That is not to say that I spent, it was not a long time here, so we kind of made a final decision at DreamHack or just following DreamHack winter 2010, back in the days. We had a Christmas break, and then we are suddenly on planes over to Kiev mid-January or whatever. So it was like 2, 3, 4 weeks max of practice. Generally, still, I felt that we can go and win this. The practice went really well, and we figured out a way to play the game. I think Exist was popping off. I mean, he had an amazing final. Sure. We found a way how to kind of, I wouldn't say use him, but to facilitate all that he brings to the game. He was a star player at that point. That is maybe a bit confusing to hear for someone that is only followed Exist through CSGO. Although he was a really good, as a very, let's say, holistically capable player. But he was definitely the star player in our team. And we had Delpan. He was comparable at times with the Markelov or even Starix. Sure. I think, they had a very unique situation with Navi. They had two of the best operas at the same time in a very kind of AWP-friendly meta. But I recall that I got like a congratulations from f0rest at the after party, because I think what they just did after losing groups was that they probably told the same manager that you referred to at SK, like, just get us the fuck out of
basically,
here and get back to the drawing board.
Yes.
But anyway, I got that message, and I kind of like, there was something inside of me, I think, and it's not me romanticizing this very, very long after, but maybe it was like, I made it in a sense, or I was able to really show the same that I talked about for
validation,
like repeating success. And actually, there is something there that no one can take away from me now.
Yeah.
And that catapulted me. Although I'm definitely way more capable and more confident in myself these days as a team manager and making decisions and all of those things that I was. That was probably only starting like 3 years ago when I start to kind of like make sense out of everything that have happened in a very tough era where League of Legends, CSGO, Dota, maybe all of those teams losing at the same time. But it was quite life changing in that regard. That I'm not a hoax, you know. I shouldn't feel, which everyone does, right? Feeling like imposters at times, but. There was a really, really good moment. And obviously we were wrapped up that year, although in a different scene, in a different constellation of players, winning DreamHack the same year. So I think we won a total of 3 international tournaments that year. And I think if I would ask you, December 2010, or Lurpis, or many others out there, do you think this Fnatic roster will win any tournaments from this point onwards? I think the simple answer would have been no to that, but we showed that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But at the same time, I'm going to stress this. I do think entering to... And it's a bit interesting here now, actually. I'm curious to hear your thoughts as well. But 2011 Counter-Strike 1.6 is quite comparable to Counter-Strike in, well, let's say the year prior COVID. There was a point of time in Counter-Strike, like, Fnatic could go and win 5 consecutive events, 2 consecutive majors, I think, right? You have Astralis 2016 onwards. I mean, they're still very much staying on the top, and it's a remarkable story. Navi, not to be forgotten either, but you're having way more contenders now in a year of 365 days, maybe 20 events. You're not going to have like one team that is just winning like 68% of those events. It's very like, it's a rotating thing. Is very much now, again, being that consistent force and just being... And that's also like team management and leadership, basically like being also able to reflect and making something good out of the losses. Because I've seen it, I've been there as well. Teammates, today's players as well, many of them, like, one loss equals game over. I cannot play with you again. You have betrayed me. You as an organization made this decision a few weeks ago or a few months ago. And that's something that is very impressive to see in the Navi right now, right? Becoming philosophical again, but you see Simple, for example, right? He speaks a lot on social these days about the excellency of his organization and especially teammates in terms of what they bring to the table for him. And that might be maybe some event he had a few years ago when he was kind of like, well, in order to actually win consistently, I need to think differently. I'm one of the best, if not the best player at that point. Now he's the best in my book. But just like, it's a team-based game, right? I have 4 other members and a coach. How do I make myself as good teammate for them, but equally, how do I as a teammate make them better? And that's very fascinating, that entire thing. And we thought very little about that in the past, and obviously a lot of work still to be done. But just that part, I think, without being able to describe it, was something that we kind of had it in the core, consisting of myself, DSN, and maybe the Fnatic organization back in the Counter-Strike days, which allowed us to exist. We actually think you can be the best in the world. Delpan, you're fucking amazing in your AWP. We're going to play together, and this is how we do it. Here's the AWP. here's the scout. We're losing the CTPist round. Just do what you fucking can. I don't care. If I have 0-15 and leave Kiev winning or silver, I would be happy with that too, probably. That's enough for me. And I think that's the interesting part, right? I mean, you have a lot of science and psychological assessments, whatever, in the world of sports, but team-based sports, in me, it's very much around like just building great teammates. And at times, obviously, that becomes maybe less important when you have the best player in the world, especially when we talk about esport titles, most of them having 5.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.